And to my grandson Ardon, I leave $20. The attorney paused, lifting his eyes from the page with a look that could have been mild embarrassment or carefully hidden amusement. Around the long conference table, my family burst into laughter. My brother Derek laughed the hardest, slamming his hand against the polished mahogany table hard enough to make the water glasses shake. $20, he gasped between laughs, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes. A full 20. Grandpa really made his opinion clear about you, little brother. My sister Melissa was quieter, covering her mouth with her manicured fingers, but her shoulders trembled as she tried to suppress her laughter. My father made no effort to hide his satisfaction, leaning back in his leather chair with a smirk that confirmed everything he had always believed about me. I stayed still at the far end of the table, watching them enjoy my embarrassment. The lawyer, a silver-haired man named Franklin Pierce, who had handled my grandfather's affairs for more than 30 years, looked at me with what might have been sympathy or perhaps awareness of something the others did not know. The bequest includes this envelope, Franklin said, sliding a small white envelope across the table toward me. Mr. Holloway was very clear that it was to be given to you directly and opened by you alone. I picked it up. It was light, almost empty. Through the paper, I could feel the shape of a folded bill. Open it, Derek said, still grinning. Let us see Grandpa's generosity. Maybe it's a rare 20 worth 21. The table filled with laughter again. My mother, silent until then, reached over and touched my hand in what was meant to be comforting but felt more like pity. I did not open the envelope. Not there, not in front of them. I think we're finished, I said calmly, standing. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. I'll contact you if I have questions. I left the conference room with the envelope in my pocket, leaving behind their laughter and the list of what my grandfather had actually left them. The Connecticut house worth $800,000 to my brother, investment accounts totaling over $500,000 to my sister, the main vacation home to my parents, and the remaining cash divided among relatives who had come to claim their portions. $20. After 12 years of weekly visits, Sunday dinners, sitting with him through chemotherapy, physical therapy, and the slow fade of dementia. After being the only grandchild who consistently showed up, listened, and cared. $20. I waited until I was alone in my car in the concrete parking garage beneath the law firm. The cold gray space felt appropriate for what I expected to be a cold moment. I slid my finger under the flap and opened the envelope. Inside was a single $20 bill, ordinary in every way. Andrew Jackson looked back at me with his usual stern expression, offering no explanation. Then I turned it over. The serial number had been circled, not once but several times with thick red marker. The ink was heavy and deliberate, impossible to overlook if you paid attention. 8 digits and 2 letters outlined like a coded message, which I immediately understood was exactly what it was. My grandfather had been an accountant for 47 years. Numbers were his language, his way of understanding the world. When I struggled with math as a child, he spent hours with me, showing me how numbers told stories if you learned how to read them. Every figure mattered. Nothing in accounting was accidental. Numbers don't lie, he used to say. People lie, institutions lie, but numbers, when understood correctly, always tell the truth. I stared at the circled serial number and felt certain my grandfather was speaking to me. The question was how. I should have recognized the signs. They had been there for 35 years. My name is Ardon Holloway. I am 35 years old and I work as an accountant at a mid-sized firm in Hartford, Connecticut. I followed the same professional path as my grandfather, drawn to ledgers, statements, and financial structure. It was one of the few things about me he openly respected, and one of the things my family regularly mocked. Arden the accountant, Derek would joke at gatherings as if it were an insult, counting beans for a living. Derek called himself a real estate developer. In reality, he bought properties using money borrowed from our father, hired contractors to do the work, and sold the houses with profits that never seemed to translate into independence. At 40, he still depended on our parents to help with mortgage payments during frequent, slow periods. Melissa was an interior designer, meaning she spent other people's money making their homes look expensive. She was skilled with a strong sense of style and a talent for persuading wealthy clients to replace functional furniture with trendier options. She was 38, divorced twice, and dating a man likely to become her third ex-husband. I was the youngest and the quietest, never fitting into the family's preferred self-image. The Holloways valued charisma, risk-taking, and bold claims of success. I was cautious and precise, more comfortable with spreadsheets than social events, more interested in accuracy than appearances. My grandfather, Walter Holloway, had been the same. He built a stable career as a certified public accountant, eventually running his own small firm for 3 decades. He was not flashy by family standards, but he was dependable, ethical, and exact. He paid his taxes, kept perfect records, and refused shortcuts that compromised integrity. The rest of the family viewed that life with thinly veiled contempt. My father, Walter's only son, rejected accounting early and went into sales and marketing instead. He earned more money and made sure everyone knew it. He wasted his talent, I once overheard my father say. All that discipline, just doing other people's taxes, no ambition. My father never understood that numbers were not a waste to my grandfather. They were a purpose, a way to impose order and uncover truth in a dishonest world. My grandfather loved his work the way others love art or music, and I felt the same connection. That shared understanding is why we bonded in a way he never quite did with Derek, Melissa, or even his own son. As soon as I was old enough to sit still, I spent afternoons in his small office watching him work. He explained each step, breaking down complex statements into pieces I could follow, showing how money moved through people and businesses, leaving trails for those who knew how to look. Everyone has a story, he would say, tapping a ledger or receipt. These numbers tell you who they really are, not who they pretend to be, but who they are when no one is watching. Those afternoons shaped me more than any classroom ever did. They gave me a way to understand the world, a belief that truth could be uncovered if you were patient and precise enough to search for it. They also gave me something rare in my family, a real connection with someone who saw me as I was and valued it. Those ideas became a personal guideline, shaping how I approached not only math but life in general. While Derek and Melissa learned how to impress adults and navigate social situations, I learned how to read spreadsheets and trace financial activity. While they discovered that charm could open doors, I learned that patience and careful attention could uncover truths charm never would. My grandfather noticed this early. He called me his little auditor, a nickname Derek and Melissa laughed at, but one I quietly appreciated. When I was around 8, he began giving me small tasks during our visits, sorting receipts by date, checking simple ledgers for errors, solving accounting puzzles disguised as games, rewarded with a few coins when I got them right. When I was 10, he told me, "You have a gift. Most people see numbers as confusion. You see patterns. That's rare, Arden. That matters. Never let anyone shame you for it." I held on to those words, especially as my family made it clear they found my interests dull and my personality unremarkable. Derek was the athlete and performer. Melissa was the creative social favorite. I was simply Arden, quiet and focused on numbers, and no one seemed to think that was worth praising, except my grandfather. As his health declined, I became his most regular visitor. Every Sunday, without exception, I drove 45 minutes from Hartford to his home in Westbrook, bringing groceries, medication, or just my time. We sat in his kitchen drinking tea and talking about numbers, life, and family tensions. He shared things with me I do not believe he shared with anyone else. Stories about his childhood, choices he made, and opportunities he declined because they conflicted with his principles. He spoke about his disappointment with my father, always framing it as his own failure rather than my father's shortcomings. During one of our last clear conversations before the dementia worsened, he admitted, "I never knew how to reach him. He wanted a different kind of father, more exciting, more daring. I was just a man who loved numbers. That was never enough for him. I told him it was enough for me, and I meant it." He looked at me with such quiet emotion that I had to look away. "You're the only one who ever understood," he said. "The only one who really saw. Remember that, Ardan. When the time comes, remember you were the one who saw." I did not understand then. I assumed it was a confused remark from a declining mind. I was wrong. After leaving the law firm, I drove straight to First National Bank in Westbrook, where my grandfather had kept his accounts for more than 50 years. I knew the branch manager, Patricia Vance, who had handled his affairs in his later years and always treated him with dignity. I walked in with the $20 bill in my pocket, unsure whether my theory meant anything or whether I was forcing meaning where none existed. Patricia greeted me warmly and offered her condolences. I thanked her, then hesitated before explaining that I needed her trust. I showed her the bill and the serial number circled in red. I asked if the number could correspond to anything at the bank, a deposit box, an account, anything. She examined it closely, her expression tightening in concentration before shifting to recognition. She asked me to wait and disappeared into the back. Minutes passed and doubt set in. Then she returned, visibly shaken, her tone suddenly formal, and asked me to follow her. She led me through a secured corridor into the basement vault where the safety deposit boxes were kept. The room was cold and silent, lined with metal compartments. She stopped in front of one of the largest boxes. It had been opened by my grandfather in 1987, paid 50 years in advance, with access granted only through a specific combination. She glanced at the bill. The combination was the serial number. My legs nearly gave out. For 37 years, my grandfather had maintained this box, setting a condition that only someone who truly understood him would ever think to solve. Patricia explained that the agreement stated the contents belonged entirely to whoever provided the correct code. No estate involvement, no family claims. When I asked if I could proceed, my voice barely carried the words. "Can I see what's inside?" Patricia nodded and removed the box from its place in the wall, using both her key and a code entered into a small keypad. Despite its size, the box was surprisingly heavy. She placed it on a table in the center of the room and stepped back. "I'll give you privacy," she said. "Take as much time as you need. Press the button by the door when you're ready." She left, and I was alone with whatever my grandfather had hidden for 37 years, waiting for someone to understand his message. I opened the box. For several seconds, my mind resisted what I was seeing, searching for a logical explanation that would make it make sense. Inside was gold, not jewelry or coins, but bars. Solid gold ingots, neatly stacked, each stamped with its weight and purity, reflecting the vault's fluorescent light. I counted them automatically. 47 bars, each weighing about 1 kilogram. I lifted one. It was cool, dense, unmistakably real. I had only seen gold bars in pictures before. Holding one made the concept of wealth feel tangible. At current market prices, which I knew well, each bar was worth about $64,000. 47 bars came to roughly $3 million in gold alone, sitting quietly in a small-town Connecticut bank, hidden by a man my family had always dismissed as ordinary. I set the bar down and continued. Beneath the gold were stock certificates bundled with rubber bands, shares in established companies: Apple, Microsoft, Berkshire Hathaway, Johnson & Johnson. Many certificates dated back decades, purchased when these companies were undervalued or ignored. A quick mental estimate put their current value at least $4 million, likely more. There were also bearer bonds, something I had studied but rarely seen, anonymous instruments still valid despite falling out of use. Their combined face value was around 1.7 million. I leaned back, doing the math. Gold, stocks, bonds. Conservatively, the contents totaled $8 to $9 million. All accumulated quietly over a lifetime, hidden until someone solved the puzzle. At the very bottom was an envelope, plain white, identical to the one that had held the $20 bill, my name written in my grandfather's careful handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a multi-page letter written in the same precise script I had seen all my life. "Dear Arden, if you are reading this, then you solved the puzzle." I knew you would. You always understood that numbers tell stories if you listen closely. By now, you've seen what's here. You may wonder how an accountant who lived modestly for 87 years accumulated roughly $8.7 million in assets no one knew about. The answer is simple. I was good at my work and careful with my privacy. I started this box in 1987 when I realized I no longer trusted the person my son had become. Money changed him. Success changed him. He began to see me not as a father, but as an inheritance. He visited only when he wanted something. I saw the same pattern with Derek and Melissa. They learned that relationships were transactional. They came when they needed money, remembered me when it suited them, and showed concern only when they thought it might affect my will. But not you. You came every Sunday for 12 years. You brought what I needed, but more importantly, you brought yourself. You never asked for anything, you simply cared. The will you heard today was not a mistake. It was a test. I wanted them to show you who they are, one last time. They do not deserve you, and they do not deserve this wealth. Everything in this box is yours. It is legally separate from my estate and protected from any claims. Use it wisely. Build a life based on your values. And when they come to you, remember how they laughed. I loved you. Thank you for understanding. Grandfather, I sat in the vault for a long time, letter in hand, surrounded by more wealth than I had ever imagined. I thought about the years of Sunday visits and quiet conversations that had seemed ordinary, but clearly meant everything to him. The letter did not detail how he built the fortune, but I understood enough. He had watched clients succeed and fail, learned from their mistakes, invested patiently. While others chased fast returns, he bought quality assets and held them for decades. He reinvested and pounded, bought gold when it was cheap, bonds when rates were high, stocks when markets were down. He kept it secret, not from fear, but because he had seen what money did to people he loved. He chose long ago to leave this portion of his life's work to someone who had earned it through consistency and care. I thought about my family laughing in that conference room, celebrating what they believed was my embarrassment. They had treated my grandfather as something to extract value from. He had seen it clearly. He kept his own records. And in the end, the numbers told the truth, just as he always said they would. I did not tell my family about the box. Not yet. I needed time to think. The first step I took was hiring an estate attorney, Rachel Torres, who specialized in asset protection. I showed her everything: the box contents, the letter, the agreement. She reviewed the documents carefully. "This is extremely well designed," she said. "Your grandfather ensured these assets are completely separate from the estate. There's no legal path for your family to claim any of it, even if they knew it existed, which they didn't. And I would like to keep it that way, at least for now." Rachel nodded. That was entirely my right. The contents of the box were my property, subject only to standard taxes when assets were sold. I was under no obligation to disclose any of it. Over the following weeks, Rachel and I worked carefully to document and secure the inheritance. We liquidated part of the holdings, converting some gold and bonds into more diversified investments. New accounts were created in my name, trusts and protective structures were established, and everything was reported properly for tax purposes. My grandfather would have approved. He believed in doing things correctly, even when no one was watching, and I intended to honor that principle. After full accounting, the inheritance totaled $8.7 million, money my family knew nothing about, built slowly over decades by a man they had dismissed as dull and unambitious, hidden in a way only someone who understood human behavior would choose. Outwardly, my life remained unchanged. I kept my job at the accounting firm, paid my rent, drove the same modest car, and avoided any visible shifts that might raise questions. I stayed patient, just as my grandfather had taught me. About 3 weeks after the will reading, Derek called. His voice carried the familiar tone of forced friendliness that always meant he wanted something. He made light of the will, dismissed the $20 as a joke, then quickly pivoted to an investment opportunity, suggesting I put in a few $1,000s. I declined calmly and ended the call. It confirmed what I already knew. Even when they believed I had nothing, my family still looked for ways to extract value. Melissa called about a week later, taking a different approach. She framed my situation as emotional damage, offering sympathy, therapy referrals, and even help paying for sessions. I recognized it for what it was, an attempt to position me as unstable in case I ever challenged the estate. I assured her I was fine and ended the conversation. My mother called next, expressing concern and suggesting I come stay with them to process my feelings. I declined politely. When she insisted my grandfather's decision must have been devastating, I told her I trusted his judgment. The pause that followed told me she was recalculating. My father never called at all, which surprised me only slightly. 2 months after the will reading, Franklin Pierce contacted me. My father and siblings had filed a motion contesting the will, claiming my grandfather lacked mental capacity when he made the final revisions. Franklin explained that while they could try, extensive documentation existed showing my grandfather was fully competent. When I asked about assets outside the will, Franklin confirmed what I already knew. He had helped set up the safety deposit box decades earlier. Those assets were entirely separate, protected by the bank's agreement, and untouchable by probate claims. My family could not access them, even if they knew about them. Franklin also told me my grandfather had spoken of me often and with pride. The legal challenge dragged on for months. My family's attorneys filed repeated motions arguing dementia, undue influence, and unfair distribution. Franklin countered each claim with medical testimony, witness statements, and clear evidence of intent. They fought over what they believed was a mistake, never realizing the $20 was the most important part of the will. They did not know about the box, the serial number, or the planning behind it. While they argued over appearances, my grandfather's real legacy remained exactly where he intended: secure, deliberate, and based on evidence. The documentation clearly showed that my grandfather had consulted multiple attorneys over the years, carefully constructing his estate plan with full awareness and intent. The judge was not persuaded by my family's claims. She emphasized that testators have broad discretion in distributing their assets and that leaving one grandchild a smaller inheritance does not indicate incapacity. She noted that my grandfather had documented his reasoning clearly. While it may have been difficult for some family members, his decisions were entirely rational. In the end, the challenge failed completely. Franklin's records were irrefutable, demonstrating that my grandfather was fully competent and deliberate in his choices. The judge dismissed the case and ordered my family to cover all legal costs, a final indignity that apparently infuriated my father for weeks. I learned of their rage secondhand from cousins and distant relatives, who described my father, Derek, and Melissa as convinced I had somehow manipulated the situation. "They think Grandpa gave you some secret information," one cousin said. "They are obsessed with figuring out what you know." If only they had known the full extent of the gift, the depth of my grandfather's planning, they would have been even more furious. But I remained silent. I continued living modestly, working my job, and quietly managing the $8.7 million now in my control. I did make some practical changes. I paid off student loans that had burdened me for over a decade, purchased a modest home, and increased charitable giving. I founded the Walter Holloway Foundation in his honor, focusing on accounting education and financial literacy for underserved communities. My grandfather believed understanding numbers was empowering and transformative. I now had the resources to extend that belief far beyond what he could have imagined. The foundation began with a few programs in Hartford and nearby towns, offering free tax preparation where predatory preparers had charged hundreds of dollars. We partnered with community colleges to provide scholarships for first-generation accounting students. As the work grew, we received grants, recruited volunteers from the accounting profession, and expanded into workshops on budgeting, saving, and investing. Within 2 years, the foundation had assisted over 3,000 families with taxes, funded 47 scholarships, and taught financial literacy to more than 500 adults. Each success, every scholarship, every family gaining control of their finances, felt like a tribute to my grandfather. His gift gave me more than wealth. It gave me purpose. It demonstrated that the skills and patience I'd been mocked for could make a real difference. Wealth, he had taught me, is meaningful only when it serves others. I thought of those Sunday afternoons in his kitchen, the patient lessons about how numbers tell stories, and the unspoken lesson: the most valuable things in life are not measured in dollars, but in love and trust. I visit his grave monthly, sharing the progress of the foundation, the impact we are making, and the continued dysfunction of my family. I thank him for seeing me when no one else did, for trusting me with his legacy, and for teaching me that patience and understanding matter more than bank statements. He left me $20, and everyone laughed, thinking it a final insult. They were wrong. He left me $20 because he knew I would understand. I would see the circled serial number, recall his teachings about numbers, and follow the path he had laid out decades earlier. That puzzle was my inheritance, and through it, he left me everything that truly mattered. Last month, I received a letter from Derek. It was brief, explaining that his development project had failed and requesting a loan for his mortgage. There was no apology for years of mockery or legal battles. He simply assumed I would help because family does that. I considered my grandfather's letter, his advice to remember how my family had laughed and to make choices accordingly. I reflected on years of being dismissed and overlooked, treated as less than my siblings because I was quiet and methodical. Then I decided who I wanted to be, not who my family expected, not who my grandfather might have urged me to be, but who I truly was. I wrote Derek a check for $20, enclosed a brief note that it was all I could spare, and sent it. I never heard from him again. Some might call it cruel or argue I should have helped, that holding grudges serves no one. But I had learned from my grandfather that value is not measured in money alone. It is measured in wisdom, understanding, and knowing when to act in alignment with your principles. But I think my grandfather would have understood. The $20 was never an insult. It was a key, a test, a message of love hidden in a puzzle only I could solve. Sending $20 to Derek was different. It was the truth spoken plainly. It represented the care and respect I had been given over the years, returned in kind. If they had treated me as family, I would have treated them the same. But they did not. None of them did. I have finally accepted that this was not my failure. It was theirs. I am 37 now, 2 years past that day in the lawyer's office when my family mocked my inheritance. I live in my small house, drive a modest car, and work at my accounting firm. Outwardly, nothing seems different, but everything has changed. I have financial security. I will never be vulnerable to the unpredictability of career or economy. I have the satisfaction of knowing my grandfather saw me, loved me, and trusted me with his legacy. And I have freedom, the understanding that my worth does not depend on my family's approval. Sometimes I wonder what my grandfather would think if he could see me now, the foundation bearing his name, the lives we have changed, the legacy we are building. I think he would be proud, not because of the money, which he never valued the way my family does, but because of what it represents. Patience, integrity, and genuine human connection prove to be worth far more than the flash and charisma my family prized. I think of him every day. Every time I open a spreadsheet, guide a client, or explain to a scholarship recipient that their story matters, he is there with me. His voice reminds me that numbers tell stories, and that truth, patiently pursued, will always be revealed. The numbers told the truth, just as he always said they would. The truth is this: I was the one who mattered. I was the one who showed up. I was the one who deserved what he had to give. $20, that is what my grandfather left me in his will, $8.7 million. That is what he left me in truth. And the knowledge that I was loved completely, unconditionally, by at least one person in my family, this is worth more than all the money combined. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Before you go, I've left two more stories on your screen, both from men who discovered that family is not always who you are born to, but who stands by you when the truth comes out. Click whichever one calls to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it's like to be the outsider looking in, the notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember, your story matters, even if they tried to erase it.